Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. And we're going to be talking about the path to LGBTQ equity and inclusion and using resident-directed principles to really give that some context. And we're excited that this is kind of a continuation of our Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube live event that we did on Monday. And Better Together is a joint effort between Pioneer Network and the Eden Alternative. Last year, we did a series of webinars, and this year we're doing Facebook Live events. And the one that we held on Monday was our third in our 2021 series of 4. So I'm so happy to be joined by my colleague, Joan Devine, but also my colleagues, Chris and Meredith from the Eden Alternative. So welcome, everyone. And we think we're going to have a great discussion today as a continuation of what we started on Monday with Sherrill, Wayland, and Dan Stewart. And I thought that, one of the things that we love about this type of event right here is that we can see each other and we can interact. And that's why we encourage you all to turn on your cameras and really be part of the conversation. But I think to set the stage, what we'd like to do is have Sherrill and Dan just introduce themselves by telling us their story about how they got here to do this work and what they're going to be talking about today. So I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but I'll turn it over to Sherrill and Dan.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump in and go first, Penny. And why don't we both start, Dan, just by introducing ourselves and our organizations, and then we can tell a little bit more about our stories. So I'm Sherrill Wayland. I'm the Director of National Education Initiatives with SAGE. And SAGE provides advocacy and services for LGBTQ older adults. We're the largest and oldest organization dedicated to LGBTQ aging. And we like to say that we really center the LGBTQ story within the aging sector, and we center aging within the LGBTQ community. So, we're just really excited to be here and be a part of this work. And Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and good evening. My name is Dan Stewart. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of the Aging Equality Project at the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. The Human Rights Campaign is the largest LGBTQ advocacy organization in the US. As part of the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, we are the educational arm. We do the work changing hearts and minds, but also policy and procedures within child welfare services, corporation, hospital systems, and our latest long-term care quality index, working within the long-term care quality field. So we're excited to have this conversation today and share more about the long-term care quality index, but really share stories and hear from you all. So Cheryl's gonna get us started and kind of telling us how she got into this work, and I'll follow suit.
So thank you, Dan. My journey into the realm of LGBTQ aging really started back in 2006. And I had been in the work of disability and education for a number of years and had been a disability advocate and decided that I really wanted to give back to the LGBTQ community. And when I first started down this path, I thought I was going to work with youth. And I think oftentimes we're drawn to working with younger adults because we know what it's like to be a younger person. And then I started to hear from friends and family, and most of my network of friends are 15 to 20 years older than me. And they really started to drive home the fact that nobody was doing work around LGBTQ aging in St. Louis, where I'm from. And so I really kind of changed directions and said, okay, what would it be like to center LGBTQ older adults in my ongoing advocacy and outreach? So that's really how I started, in this work. And through that, I met a number of older adults when I first started out. And I was actually at a community meeting with about 20 older women. And I posed the question to them, what are your plans as you age? Should you need to, seek services from a residential community, from a skilled nursing home? What does that look like for you? And, after a while, one of the women in that group said, well, I guess we're just going to have to move. we're going to have to move to a state or another city that's more open and accepting of LGBTQ older adults, so that we might have an opportunity to find a community that's going to accept us as a lesbian couple. And I sat there and thought, this is not the answer. LGBTQ older adults should be able to remain in their communities, to hopefully remain in their home and have supports that are accepting and welcoming, that are coming into their home. And if they need to turn to a residential community, that they can find a community in their neighborhood, just like their neighbors do, where they can be welcomed and supported and continue to be a part of their community and age in community, and not feel like they have to move. And so that's really what started me along this path. Our first office, so I started a local SAGE affiliate in St. Louis back in 2008. And our first office was actually inside a residential community in St. Louis. And that to me was really a sign of progress, that we had a community that offered us a space to call home for our young organization that was starting to grow. And so that's really how I started, in this work, and with the focus on reaching out to long-term care communities and working with groups like the Pioneer Network and the Eden Alternative. And then, you fast forward from 2008 to 2019, we launched the Long-Term Care Equality Index. And that's where my work with the HRC Foundation and with Dan has really started to take shape over the last couple of years. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you share a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Sherrill. The phrase that you said, that often, people getting into helping professions often want to help youth, right? Because we understand what those experiences may be like. And aging is something that we don't understand until it happens, right? As it's actively happening. And I think about my own experience getting into specifically the intersection of aging and LGBTQ work. In 2014, I was working on my master's in gerontology, and in my second day of my social gerontology course, our professor said, take 10 minutes and write down what your life will be like at 80. I had just started socially transitioning. I had just started taking hormones and medically transitioning, and had experienced family loss, was not married, and all of a sudden was in a place where I thought, I will probably have to rely on some sort of formalized care if I'm older. I don't have the support systems. I am in a space where my documents don't match. I am needing medical care that may or may not be offered, or people may be familiar with. And so it was that first initial reaction of, oh no, about my own experience, to actually see what was out there in the literature. And unfortunately, what we've seen and what we've known and what we continue to know for the 15, 20 plus years that we've been able to get some good data and conversations with people, is that for a lot of LGBTQ folks, we're a big piece of survival is concealment. And unfortunately, if we are actively, as aging service providers, as residential service providers, as social support, in order to provide that level of care, of personalized care, it is a matter of creating a space where people feel welcomed and seen. And unfortunately, what we know is that we live in a very ageist world. And I think that's also really important to understand and recognize that not only are we dealing with the challenges within a industry that's becoming somewhat more familiar with LGBTQ folks, but we're also living in a world where we're not actively looking at aging folks in general, as we know. And so it really is, in my work jumping into this role and meeting Sherrill over the last number of years, of seeing that there is such a need to uplift the community, often within communities that are facing systematic oppression. We rely on mutual aid, we rely on community members, we rely on this idea of, where am I safe, word of mouth, who can I go to, where can I stay? And now, we are in an opportunity with HRC Foundation, with SAGE, and large organizations all over, where we can create a systematic approach to actually creating that inclusive community that we want and see and know that we can have. And what we've come to find out is people have such a strong desire and heart to welcome LGBTQ elders, to welcome residents into their community, but maybe without the knowledge, maybe without the policies, the practices. Because what we know is we're all human and we all want to provide this quality care. But what has been shown in literature, what has been shown in what conversations Sherrill and I have had anecdotally, with people in the field is, what are the right steps? What are the perfect steps that are going to align if I follow into this particular situation or not? And that can be really scary if you're not exactly sure what to do. So as a gerontologist, as an educator, as someone who does advocacy work, it is a really unique opportunity that we're in right now when it comes to progressing the aging field forward, and that we are armed with best practices that have worked in the healthcare system that has already addressed and started to see LGBTQ patients, best practices from organizations and employers. And so in doing that, we're able to kind of operationalize what does it mean to have a welcoming space. So kind of as we dive in and want to share a little bit more about what the actual LEI is, I just wanted to share like a quick video that we've made with some LGBTQ elders, specifically about the impact of the LEI, and then we can break that down a little bit as we continue on. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. And I'll also go ahead and I'm going to play this, but I'm also put it in the chat. So if you want to watch the video later, you're able to as well.
If you don't think you have lesbian,
gay,
bisexual, and transgender people in your long-term care community,
think again.
Upward of 5% of your residents are members of the LGBTQ community.
we are living in your communities and may stay silent or in the closet.
Because we are afraid of discrimination.
That's not surprising since many of us have lived for decades under legal discrimination.
Discrimination that persists today.
There are over 2.5 million LGBTQ people over the age of 50 living in America today.
Experts predict that by the year 2030,
close to 7 million LGBTQ elders will be seeking care and services.
That's why it's more important than ever that long-term care communities like yours support us as we age.
And treat us with dignity and respect so that we won't be forced to go back into the closet.
And it is often more difficult for Black and Latinx members of our community.
Fear of inadequate care and discrimination are compounded by racism.
Across the country, LGBTQ elders are not getting the care and support we need to thrive.
Let's change that.
The Human Rights Campaign Foundation and SAGE believe
that most long-term care communities want LGBTQ elders to feel welcome and get the care they need.
And deserve.
And that's why the LEI exists.
the LEI helps long-term care communities adopt better policies so that they can provide culturally competent and responsive care to LGBTQ elders.
with your help, we can change the future.
Let's make sure that long-term care communities are welcoming and inclusive to LGBTQ elders like me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
Sign up for the Long-Term Care Equality Index today.
I love that video. I don't tear up at it as much as I used to, which, to be fair, we've had that video out for 2 years. And so considering that I watch it pretty often, it's a good one. And, I really love working with the Pioneer Network and Eden Alternative and organizations that first and foremost center the resident, the client, the person, because ultimately that's why we do what we do, right? Like that's why we show up to these webinars. That's why we go to continuing educations. It's in what way can we best support ourselves, best support our residents. And so in one way in particular, thank you for putting the link in there, is this new both self-assessment and benchmarking tool that was developed through the Human Rights Campaign and SAGE. It is based on our healthcare quality index, which is what we've done with hospital systems. So utilizing a benchmarking system that we've developed in partnership with long-term care service providers, older adults themselves, LGBT advocates, lawyers, things of that like, are able to create some resources that provide a tool that long-term care providers can then see where they're at when it comes to LGBTQ inclusivity. So we're excited. Thank you, Sherrill, for putting that out there. I'll also go ahead and drop in that video link if you want to share with folks outside of today too.
Well, and I think one of the things that we talked about on Monday that just resonated so much with me is that, you know, the Eden Alternative and Pioneer Network have these set of principles, and that's kind of how we came to this conversation. And so much of what we talked about on Monday just, I mean, were illustrated in the set of principles too. I know, for instance, and Eden friends jump in, you know, one of Pioneer Network's primary principles is to know each person. Because the thought is that if we get to know each person, we can understand those individual needs. And Dan and Sherrill, you know, I mean, so much of what you talk about too is getting to know people, is getting to know their story, developing relationships. And it seems so simple to me, but I know that it's not simple. So I think that, you know, developing the LEI, you know, so many communities say, and you said this before, that communities want to do the right thing. They just don't know exactly how to do that right thing. And the LEI gives them kind of this framework, at least to start with, right?
Yeah, and thank you for that, Penny, because that listening to you talk really brought me back to what I've heard so often, especially when we would go in to provide training to whether a long-term care community or a home health care agency, whatever the setting might be. We can't discriminate because we treat everyone the same. And you always want to pause and say, okay, what's the standard that you're using in your care, and what is that based on? Because if we're treating everyone the same, then we are leaving folks out. We are not hearing the individual stories. That's not a person-centered approach. We need to be treating everyone from where they are, from who they are, from what their story is. And that's really how we create the person-centered approach, is to knowing the person and not thinking everyone is the same, because we're not.
I think that's a conversation, Sherrill, that has come up so much also in the last couple of years among, you know, everyone in society. That idea of, you know, treating everyone the same is not necessarily the goal here. Seeing everyone as the same person is not really the goal here. And it's interesting because I never really thought about that as to how that applies to long-term care, to elders, to residents, even though we talk about, you know, getting to know each person, but it really is sort of that same thing. I mean, it's really digging down to know individuals, because how else can we provide and support people if we don't know what they need individually? So I think it really is this very interesting conversations. And I said this on Monday, you know, I think that, Dan, you talked about ageism, that, you know, we could really try to negate and mitigate the isms if we just got to know people.
And I think Sherrill, as you were talking, it also made me think of something that I heard years ago, and talking about the golden rule. And I think we all believe in the golden rule: do unto others as you would want done unto you. But there is a platinum rule, which I just find to be just the next step up there. And it is do unto others as they would want done unto them, because you don't necessarily want it done to you the way I want it done to me, whatever that done is. And that comes from knowing the person, that I know how, you know, how to approach food. And I think that's common sense, most of us within our own families, ourselves, our spouses, our children. We all want things a little bit different. So why would that not be true of those living in our long-term care communities, or for any elder? in our society.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, I really enjoyed listening to the conversation. And when you were talking about that, Dan, it struck a big chord with me. A couple things did as I was watching the show, but it's something that I have worked on so much. So I've kind of two trains of thought that I'd like to bring up. But the first one is, when I'm teaching and educating and talking to people about this individual, that we're all individuals, I talk about knowing people's stories, not the story you're telling in your head about them, not that one. No, because we're really, really, really good at that. Okay. That's not the one. It's getting to know them. And I always say, listen, we don't jive with everybody. Not everybody on the screen is coming over to dinner. Okay. Sorry, not going to happen. But here's the thing. The more I know your story and the more I know about you, I will tell you, the more compassion and empathy I'm going to have, even if you're not my type of person. Right. So I think that is just so true. So that's how we have to get to know each other and why it's so important. The second thing that I have ran into time and time again, working in different organizations or, places that call themselves homes and really they're institutions, is that if we start doing something special or individualized for one, everybody's going to want it. You know what? And that's not true. It is absolutely not true. Like from different food preferences to different things that people want to do during their life or their activities or things like that. It doesn't have to be this huge, you're doing something for 450 people differently every day. It doesn't get like that. It doesn't have to be that complicated, but the system that we're given, again, a crappy system, not the people, right? It's a crappy system that we're given sets us up for that. It has to be the same and be fair for everyone. And that just doesn't work. So I just wanted to point out those two comments because I really think that it's really struck a chord with me when I was watching it today. So this morning.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you all for sharing that. I think what's coming up, what I hear often is even just in the way you're speaking about it, of when we're treating everyone the same, everyone's getting their med at 10 a.m. versus, treating the person how they want to be treated. Not only are we seeing them, making sure we're meeting all those ADLs, whatever it needs to be, but you celebrate them in the acknowledgement of who they are. And I think where we're all being pushed when it comes to differences or people that are different than us, it's never just been this idea of tolerance. Like we've thrown that out the window a long time ago. The idea of true acceptance isn't just being like, oh, there's Bob, he happens to be gay, don't talk about it, right? Like true acceptance is there's Bob and have you met his partner and he has these fantastic kids that come over, like this actual engagement, this community building. And so and that being said though, as you were saying, Chris, like the structure, often the system can get in the way. So I'm glad and here to share tools that work within that system that can support you make that hard culture change, but that does it within the confines of how are we going to keep our employees accountable? How are we going to make sure that we distribute our equal visitation, things of that.
And one more thing, I don't know, I got going when I was watching all this, but we talk a lot at the Eden Alternative about somebody not being known as their disease first. Right. And I really saw this in the same context. Like, I don't want to be known as, my disease first. I don't want to be known as my color first. I don't want to be known as my sexual orientation first. Right. No one's going to bring that up. I'm married to a man, but no one's going to bring that up. Oh, that's Chris. And she's married to a guy. Oh, don't talk about it though. Right. No one's going to do that. So, to take that kind of stigma out of it as well, that's not what I would want to be known as. But how do you get it deep? I really understand that organizations want to do the right thing. Sure, they do. The board of directors and all those people sitting around the big table, sure. But when we're really talking about people connecting with people on an individual level, it has to be so deep. You know what I mean? Not like on a surfacey level, like, look at us, we're the great organization because we have all these things in place, but how do we get it to run really, really deep? And that I find that as a struggle with organizations as well in person-directed care. So just throwing that one out there.
Chris, I appreciate that.
I think that's a great sorry.
No, go ahead, please, Meredith. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's a great segue. I want to just encourage people to unmute their lines and jump into the conversation. I know, we brought you in here for a two-way dialogue, and so you've joined us today. So if you want to turn your camera on or unmute and jump in, please do. That's all I was going to say, Sherrill. Continue on.
And I was just going to say, it's about relationship building, right? And I agree, I do not walk into rooms and say, hi, I'm Sherrill, the lesbian. I am Sherrill, and my sexual orientation is just one part of me. But it is a part that we need to understand, so who's going, if I'm in long-term care, who's going to be there? Who's coming in to help provide support for me? Today it would be my wife. 10 years from now, it may be, someone that I consider my family of choice, who, I may not have a legal relationship with, as far as marriage or, whatever that may be, but that person may be the one that's coming to support me and be there for me. So it's relationship building, and it's really getting to know people for who we are and not labels.
I think that Chris's point is an interesting one, though, and it's why I think the LEI is so needed, is that how do we go deep? And it's true, we talk about in the work that we do at Pioneer, and I think, the Eden Alternative as well, we talk about the how of trying to develop those relationships in a setting, for instance, senior living, long-term care, in settings where they've been challenged by that. We know, because we have this very traditional model where it's, I started off my career as a social worker, and I was taught, you don't necessarily give information of yourself. You only try to get information from the people you're talking to. And I remember my first job, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. I'm asking people, about their financial status, about personal things, about their relationships. Yet when they ask me questions, I'm not supposed to say anything, so, we even started off in healthcare in particular, on a one-way street versus a two-way street. And we know relationships really can't develop that way. So, I'm curious to talk more about that. And really, too, I know, Dan, that we want to talk about the LEI, how that gives us kind of a framework to move forward.
Can I say something?
Yes,
sorry, I will jump in. A few things I see, what you tell is the same what we see here in Europe. So that is this is nothing special or whatever we will say like this. We have the same problem here as what we see in the whole different world, who are working with LGBTQ elderly people, and to look how can you bring in better care into the nursing home or in the services of home care services. I will give you 3 examples here in Europe, but I was looking for more of this because I'm working also like social gerontologist and in person-centered care. And I'm also involved here in Spain with 2 colleagues of mine here for the Eden Alternative. So the first, I will say, there is an interesting concept in Switzerland. It's called, the concept is Alma Casa. The CEO of this Alma Casa is a guy who used the Eden Alternative, and they used also to make small units to working with people. And the thing what they are working is, this is a empathy and humanity work. So what they are doing is to have the empathy to working with people and to say we are humans. it don't matter where you are from, what you are doing or what you don't doing. So we have to look what your needs have and how is the biography and your history of the life and how we can make with this a good care plan with you, not we think we can do it. This is what I understand also with person-centered care. So we have to give solutions. We can detect what they are, what the people need, and then we give them, but we have to empower the people to say, this is what we think what you can do, but you decide what you want to do. This is what they do, and I like this a lot, this concept there, because it works, and you see that the people or the employers also was very open. It was very without barriers or something like this. This is one. Another example, and this is different, is in the Netherlands. The Netherlands, they decide as a LGBTQ community, they make something, this is like, how we will call like a stamp or something like this. They called it the pink key. It is very interesting. I'm in touch with them and we're thinking about to do something the same with them here in Spain. And this is very interesting because they say what we will do is to make a diversity community. We don't want to go in one of a person only LGBT, or because in the society of the Netherlands, they have so a lot of different kind of people, humans. So they say, what we have to show the people, we are so different all, so we have to go look for a new solution. And one of them, they developed this, this key, this pink key to give the nursing homes or other services a stamp to say, okay, you develop this inside that you can show outside that you are, I like what you said Dan before, a welcome space, because I think this is what we need to have to show the people the welcome space. This is another thing is in Berlin. This is the first what they make ever in the Europe. It's called diversity living, something like this. And this is a space there are with 20, it's only for LGBTQ. And this is a space for apartments, with living in the apartments. And inside is small units like the butterflies, you know, all the butterfly concept. That is a small unit with only 8 people inside. And from outside comes a home care service. And the home care service is LGTB. Will be say the people are LGTB. This is another thing what I detect here in Europe, or we have discussed in a lot of studies as well, is we can show a lot of people how does it feel that I'm gay, you lesbian, you trans, but if we don't have the people inside working with them, what they feel, this is necessary, that you have a person who feel what you feel. I heard a lot of time here in Spain, they say, why you need a nursing home only for LGBT? And I said, why the nuns need only a house for them? This is a decision, is an own decision for our own person. If they're persons, they decide, do you want to live together? I don't have to say they don't have to live. If this is financial sustainability, why not? You can make a diversity. We can have only LGBT or only lesbian, only gay, but this is not the problem. The problem is how the society accept different things, because this is not only different things to live or to care LGBT people. No, this is how we accept different kind of person that we are in the society, because we are not only the same. We want that all the people homogeneous, but we are not. We are all heterogeneous. So we can offer some heterogeneous, homogeneous things. It doesn't work, it doesn't fit in. And I think this is what we have here also. And I'm happy we have here one foundation in Spain, is a big one. It is in Madrid. And they now constructing or to reform a nursing home. And they will open next year the doors for only LGBT people, a nursing home for long-term care. Because I share with you, Sherrill, you said what we have to do is in the first to state that the people can stay at home, that how much and long they can. But if they have to go to a long-term care, the long-term care have to go there, you have to go to close it. And this is what had happened now. And this has happened here. This has happened in Netherlands. This has happened in Switzerland. And this has also happened in Germany. So this is what we have to do. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I love being able to have world perspectives on that, and how like having other people understand that, yes, it's not just an American thing. Like we're talking about a population that historically worldwide has experienced discrimination, and much so in many different countries. But visibility is a big part of that. And what you bring up are things that are similar. I think for speak to Sherrill and I, are similar tactics that are being used in the US, where we have the development. Sage Care seems similar to the pink key, so a kind of a training credentialing system. Having the idea of LGBT-centered long-term care communities, which a number of folks would like, LGBTQ-centered senior apartment, long-term care community, skilled nursing, assisted, whatever it may be, but also may not have the finances, to do that, or live in a geographical region to be able to access that. Although we are seeing LGBT-centered senior housing pop up in places, beyond the coast, North Carolina, all places where we need to see more vibrancy. But that being said, a lot of folks may not have that choice. And so, that's kind of where we come in, and how you were talking about, partnering with organizations that do this credentialing in order to make sure that, regardless, if you don't have a choice, this is the place in your area that has, taken these steps to make sure that on the back end, they've done the work to make sure that people are being welcoming, and that's made into the infrastructure of the community. I want to share some resources. So the LEI came out with its first report. This came out at the end of July. Let me actually type it out. So our first report came out in 2020. It includes, there's a direct link to it. It includes profiles of best practices from some of our organizations that participated, collective data, looking at long-term care policies and practices, and then some information related to organizations that have participated. So this report that came out gives us a good indication of where things are at in the field. And from what we've gathered anecdotally and things of that sort, is we're behind. We have that heart and desire to treating everyone the same. It's not uncommon if you look on a website. I mean, if you chose a long-term care community in your neighborhood, Google their website, they may have a welcome diversity statement. But in terms of actually having inclusive policies and practices, that's not always the case. And in the report at the end is a list of the communities that have participated. If you're interested in looking at the communities that are currently participating in the LEI, we kicked off in April 2019. Currently, we have a number of individual communities as well as large system sign-ons. We've had the Watermark system sign-on, United Church Home System, American House. We've had a number of organizations pop up now in the Midwest. If you are in the Midwest or connections in the Midwest, would love to speak to you all in terms of trying to increase our participants. And just sent you a list to our map. So this is a searchable map in which you can click and see the communities that are on our website. So here you can access the list of long-term care communities.
And Dan, I will share something else that might be of interest to some of our participants. And you'll have to help me with this one, refresh my memory. It was about a year ago that you and Sherrill did a webinar for Pioneer Network. And it was Long-Term Care Quality Index, introducing best practices that strengthen LGBTQ inclusive communities. And that's available on our website there's a direct link to it there, but it's under our video resources in our resource library. And that's a great way to go back and hear more from Dan and Sherrill about the LEI itself.
Yeah, and I would just also share that on behalf of Dan and I, if you're in an organization that would like to have a deeper discussion on how you can become a part of the LEI, please feel free to reach out to us, because we'd be more than happy to share with your leadership about the LEI.
And Dan, I have to say, I want to go back to a comment you made. I did this is maybe a little bit of a diversion here. But I thought it was interesting when you made the comment about, you made me think when you said, looking to a community's website and what you will or will not see. You may see the statement, but do you really see something that tells you in a meaningful way what the practices are? And yet the thing that I find fascinating about long-term care websites is the vast majority of them. This is such a challenging issue because the vast majority don't even show our residents as our residents are. They show stock photos of people that we know are not the people that live or work in our communities. And so we have this denial that we are living in. And for whatever reason, this sense that we are not willing to share who we really are and who the people that we serve really are. So, that tells us, and we've all known this in this field of person-centeredness, it makes so much sense to us, especially those of us probably sitting in this circle of squares on Zoom. It makes so much sense to us, and yet it is so hard. And darn it, why should it be? But it is.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I appreciate you sharing that, Joan. And I mean, definitely as someone who worked in long-term care, I just laugh at myself thinking about, and in the long-term care aging field where there's like stock photos of one person that's in every, lived in all the communities across the US. Because it's tricky because we are marrying a business with people's lives, right? Like we are marrying something that unfortunately as you were saying, Joan, may look at the paper or the optics versus the actual person and who are the residents there. And so it is, in terms of making the case for it, as Sherrill has mentioned, speaking to folks of doing webinars, it's also recognizing, the impact that having a person-centered, person-inclusive environment where that is prioritized, how that also is helpful for your business and bottom line too. Because it is an integration of quality care, but you can have quality care and not lose money. And I feel like that's where there's some difficulties there, where it's like, in order, you got to treat everyone the same. We got to make sure that things are passed at a certain time. We got to make sure that we're meeting these regulations. But what if we can, create regulations of some of these softer things, such as compassion? We know that they're not, we know that those are very strong, real things, but if we can provide people tools and handholds to hold on to so that they can in turn start to do that culture change. What you're bringing up, Joan, of like having photos of their actual residents, like that is a sign of culture change too. Of acknowledging who is in the community, who do they look like. And one thing, as we're on the topic of LGBTQ and aging, and I'd love to continue to share some resources. But one thing in particular that I think is important is as we're prepping communities to be LGBTQ inclusive or aging organizations, it's also recognizing that the older adults themselves may have family members that are LGBT, even if they're straight. A lot of staff and new hires are LGBTQ or highly, highly want an environment that is progressive, a work environment that's progressive and supportive. And so we've seen positive things in relation to ensuring that folks feel supported and have that educational piece as well. One thing that just came out that I wanted to share that Sherrill showed with me yesterday, it's adjacent to what we're talking about, but one thing that comes often enough is what about the residents themselves? The residents that are straight. One thing in particular in the history of Sherrill's experience with SAGE, and if you're familiar with PFLAG, formerly Parents, Friends, Lesbians, Gays, I think it's just PFLAG now, like ARP, but came out with a guide called Supporting Your LGBTQ plus Grandchild. Sherrill, would you like to share about this? Dear Abby does the foreword on that, so I have been opening that.
Yeah, so this was actually, in the past, I had done some presentations locally for older adults to help them understand what it meant to have a grandchild or a younger relative who was coming out as LGBTQ. And we had one of our long-term care providers who came to us and said, do you have resources that we can help share with residents whose grandchildren are coming out? And they're seeking to better understand that experience and how they can be, supportive of their grandchildren. So I reached out to PFLAG a couple of months ago and said, have you done anything? And if not, can we create something together? And so in honor of National Grandparents Day, which was on Sunday, we released the first guide for grandparents of grandchildren and younger relatives who are LGBTQ. So we're just really excited to have that out there. It's available in Spanish and English. And, we hope that this is something that can be used, from the Pioneer Network, from the Eden Alternative, as a way to show outreach and support for residents. We also know that when we create more allies of LGBTQ residents, that also creates supportive neighbors. And so it really does help just to make our places more welcoming to all. There's also been stories of PFLAG. Many of our PFLAG parents are now older adults themselves. And so they're living inside of, LGBTQ community or inside of long-term care communities. And so there's an opportunity to really strengthen the relationships and support of LGBTQ residents by connecting with groups such as PFLAG. So just wanted to share that resource, and Dan put it up there. It's the link right above Meredith's last statement. So.
Yeah, I mean, I love the development of that, because I think it speaks that integration, right, of SAGE and PFLAG, children, families. It's like we're living in that world and reality where we're so diverse that we're starting to recognize in which we are directly connected to that diversity. And so the idea in which we can address it from different angles of acknowledging, hey, it's not that you're just going to work with LGBTQ patients in your office, but your great grandchild may be, gender nonconforming or things like that. It always really excites me to have these conversations in our field, just because historically the reality is that the LGBTQ aging population hasn't been visible, hasn't been able to be visible, and bringing up the fact that the reality is that we lost a big generation of gay, bisexual men and trans women, often because of the AIDS epidemic. And so what we're seeing now is, with the baby boomers growing, a population that has been known as the pride generation, out, open, and less likely to want to go back into the closet. And the reality is that there isn't a need to go back into the closet if we can continue to push progressive change within organizations, because the reality is it's not just about best practices in terms of making sure, having someone be called by their name is critical. What is also important is ensuring that there are even basic protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity. In half of our states, you can still be fired, denied access, denied housing because of being LGBTQ plus in half of our states. So because of that, like, just adding those two words into an organization's non-discrimination policy is so imperative, because there could literally be nowhere else in that state where there is protection. Sherrill is in Missouri. I come from Missouri after being there for 12 years, and I think it's really also beautiful to recognize the extent into which folks in the smallest, ruralist of communities, who may have had never experience with an LGBTQ person, but had a trans woman move in, and they're doing the best that they can. And that's what we find is that people are doing the best that they can. But we do have like tried and true measures that we know are, you know, the best, most tested options as we know them. But the reality is that we're all people and everything is also malleable. So part of the LEI and part of working with long-term care communities is that our work also changes in light of what the field's at. So, you know, for example, within the long-term care quality index, we ask organizations, long-term care providers, residential long-term care providers to sign up a commitment to caring pledge. By doing that, they're given a self-assessment that goes over multiple principles, but really looks at how are you taking care of your residents, how are you taking care of your employees, how are you educating your employees, and then how are you letting the community know that you're providing these services and how are you giving back to the community and that you're providing these services. And so as we move forward, our first report that came out does not have any levels of distinction or anything of that sort. But as we move forward, we'll start to see organizations continue to grow and push themselves. So the reality is that any organization that is even thinking about doing this is on the right track and exactly where we want them to be. Often when it comes to initiatives, and you all know this more than anyone, when it comes to culture change and person-centered care, is that it's not just one intervention and we're done, right? It's a long, weaved in, critical process that can take a long time. And that being said, yes, yeah, they can all take a long time, right? We may want to change 15 policies. If we can get one by the end of the year, that's a win. So
well,
that
I was to say, Dan, as they say, it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly, and we are all about the journey, and that's
absolutely. And I just wanted to say, I just wanted to throw it real quickly before, as we're getting ready to wrap up, we did just have a couple of people join us, and I would assume that may be a time zone issue, which I have been on the end of that one many times. And I want to reassure you that if you're one of the folks that just joined us, we have recorded this, so you will have an opportunity. We'll get it out to everyone, so you'll have an opportunity to hear it. But that said, I'll turn it back over, Dan, to you and Sherrill, and as to kind of begin to wrap things up for folks.
Yeah, thank you. I am also, since we're getting closer to the end, I do want to put some more stuff in the chat in terms of just some documents about what the LEI is. You know, going back to the idea that inclusion, change, long-term change is a journey and a process. And I think Sherrill and I have good job security and that there is, you know, a big need for this, and we're really excited. But we need help, right? You know, there's only 2 of us from each organization overseeing this national thing. So yeah, please feel free to send emails. And honestly, if you have questions, we see ourselves as a resource, you know, even if it isn't specifically within the confines of long-term care and LGBTQ. If you're looking for resources for yourself or anyone you know, please feel free to reach out. You know, the way that we do any of this work is in collaboration and in partnership. And it is so critical to align yourself with partners that have those key principles and virtues in mind. And it's really neat that both the Eden and Pioneer Network have those principles written out so that they can easily be connected. You know, I can speak for Sherrill and myself and the LEI team that you can't do this work, you can't change without that heart piece. And I really respect and appreciate, you know, all of your organizations and for those that are attending to like center that heart piece, knowing that by centering it, it is going to be a little hard because it isn't just as easy as we're doing this, everyone roll out the red carpet or rainbow carpet. You know, but it is a committed effort that I know that folks, once committed to it, and we're here to support you in that. Sherrill?
Just again wanted to thank Eden Alternative and the Pioneer Network for inviting us to be a part of this work and develop deeper relationships and have these type of really important conversations across your network. So just really excited to be a part of this, and just reach out anytime that you have questions.
Thank you. I just want to say from the Eden Alternative and from myself and my job specifically, I work with a lot of different organizations on our registry. So I feel like right now, I'm really, really grateful because I feel like I have a lot more tools than I had before to help some people. So I know I'm going to post this on our private chat group, and I just feel like I really thank you so much for this partnership that we have. And thank you, Pioneer Network, as always, as well.
And on behalf of Pioneer Network, and I'll let Penny say something as well. Nice to meet Penny. But I want to thank, I have had the privilege of knowing Sherrill and Dan for quite some time, being a fellow Missourian, even though Dan deserted us, and having been able to serve on the LEI team, and an incredible group of people, and wonderful work that they're doing. But I am going to throw in just a little bit of a plug here, because, you know, a lot of what we talked about today, knowing the person, and it's all about relationships, and it's all about finding meaning and purpose for each of us. So I am going to put in this in the chat, just a little something. Next week, we do have the third of our 4th symposium for this year, since sadly we've not been able to be together in person. And it is all about finding meaning and purpose. And that is true whoever we are. As individuals, we all deserve to have meaning and purpose in our lives. So I think it all comes together, it all ties together. So that's my little piece that I will add to this. And Penny, I don't know if you had any closing comments?
I just want to thank everybody for being here, and definitely thanks to our friends at the Eden Alternative for partnering with us this year again, and special thanks to Sherrill and Dan. You know, I think that one of the things that, you know, you talked about, Dan, was that idea of partnership. And I think that all of us coming together and trying to see where we align to move things forward for all of us. You know, it's not just about, you know, them as elders or them as residents. It's about all of us. We're all growing older. And when you think about it, the things that we want and need as we grow older are some of the same things that we want now. And that's to be known. That's for people to really understand who we are and what our needs are. And I just love how you have created something that sort of formalizes it to help. It's too bad that that's the case, but that's what we need sometimes. So thanks to all of you for being part of the conversation, and Dan and Sherrill, thanks to both of you for being here and for the work that you do.